you can consider an alarm, but an alarm is never going to stop people breaking into your house. You can consider alarms for cars, and again, they're not going to stop people breaking into your house. But a lot of the crimes that we see are even more simple than that, where particularly in some suburbs in Gungahlin, the houses aren't necessarily broken into because they weren't locked in the first place. Cars weren't broken into because they weren't locked. So opportunistic thieves are just going around to cars and opening unlocked doors and removing valuables straight out of the car. So that was pretty much the meeting last week. They were concerned that there was a lot of crime going on, but in actual fact, it's not as bad as people thought. And again, I reiterate that Canberra is a really safe city to live in compared to the rest of Australia. We are actually quite safe here, and our crime rate, although it fluctuates, is fairly low if we compare it across the rest of the country.
Cool. Well, good to hear. Any questions, queries? Yep, hang on, I'll just get the microphone to you.
I really like to see the football, the square blue football thrown around.
All right, we're going for the...
Just one question. You said about the numbers of break-ins or whatever. What's the rate of finding the thieves or solving the burglaries?
Yep, and I'm glad you asked, because I've got a really... we've been given a really interesting sort of bunch of data that I'm just trying to interpret, because it's coming in a different way than what it normally does. Our clearance rate is about 75%.
It's usually the same people doing the burglary.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, I don't need to look at stats to tell you that recidivist offenders account for, and that 75% is 75% of offences have been cleared by something, either arrest or offender known but we can't prosecute or whatever. But I can tell you that between 75 to 85% of offences are committed by repeat offenders, and that's one reason why we target recidivist offenders, and we will continue to do that to keep crime down. Some people don't like that approach, but if you don't want crime in your community, then that's the approach we're going to continue with.
That's it. Hang on. Was there a question? What was the question?
I was just saying, is that a judicial problem?
The question was, is that a judicial problem?
Yeah. And thankfully I'm not from the judiciary.
That's right.
Yep. And it may well be, but I think it's more a community problem, because if you look at some of the root causes of crime, they're not just about people wanting property. They're about drugs, they're about homelessness, they're about other welfare concerns, and some of it, quite frankly, is beyond the judicial system to resolve. They're bigger issues than what the judiciary can actually do. There's some pretty basic things like, as I said, housing, drugs, welfare. They're not. I'm not suggesting that locking people up is the only solution. Sure, they don't commit offences when they're in jail, but when they're released from jail, they do commit offences. So we're not getting that rehabilitation right. We're not getting a lot of things that drive people to crime. We're not getting that right.
All right. Any other questions? Andrew?
Just what's the proportion of your time spent on domestic violence or disputes and that sort of thing?
Family violence has definitely increased over the last couple of years, and it's probably because we've shone the light on domestic violence, and because of the both local and national sort of significance events that have sort of occurred. Domestic violence and family violence is right across our community. It doesn't discriminate between socio-economic groups or nationalities, and it takes up a lot of our time. Relationship breakdowns, access to children takes up a significant portion of our time, and I can't see an easy solution to that. You know, my members are not marriage counsellors, but they do find themselves spending a lot of time speaking to people about relationships, and you know, quite frankly, there's almost a zero tolerance to violence against women, which is generally what occurs, and we do spend a lot of time doing that. I couldn't give you the exact figure, but too much time.
Question over here, Henley.
Thanks, Rod. So in term, the size of your team, like the members in Gungahlin, so what's the size where at 2015 and 16, maybe 16, 17 and now? So what's the size, size of your team?
In terms of actual staff?
Resource, yeah.
It's the same.
It's the same, but we have the population has been increased to 15, 16 and 17. It's gone crazy now. So is there something we can help, or it's in some way in the process where your department asked extra resource from the government, or how this works?
Yep, so we're working on that. It's a fairly major project that the Chief Police Officer is undertaking at the moment. And it's called the Police Services Model, and it's a new way of looking at delivering a policing model, because the way we're doing things, the way we've done things traditionally, is not as efficient as what it could be. So simply throwing more police at a problem is not necessarily going to solve it, and it really is a matter for government when we actually put the proposal forward about what model they really want to look at. We've suggested a number of other strategies that incorporate judiciary, that incorporate legislative change, that will drive down some crime, but that's a matter to be considered by government, not by us. But simply throwing extra police out on the street doesn't necessarily solve a problem. We're also looking at where we actually situate our police. So do you want a police station in particular locations, or would you prefer larger police stations that are more mobile, spending more time out in community, but only have a smaller number of centralised sort of locations? They're all things that we are sort of looking at, and also need to hear from the community what they want, because we unlike all other government departments, we provide a service that you want. As you know, the first principles of policing from Sir Robert Bell were, people are the police and police are the people. So we only provide a service that you actually want. If you want lower crime, if you want to feel safe in your community, and you want to be able to contact police in a certain way, or you want police in certain places in a certain way, you need to let us know. And they're the sort of things we're going to be discussing with community. I'm not sure how we're going to be doing that, and going through what a new model would look like. But simply adding more police is not necessarily the answer.
But yeah, thank you. But as you said, we can do something like a workshop where we can bring the community in, and then we can work out something where, because at this stage, most of the things comes to my ears, or it's always a delay. It's a time. So we need to know what's stopping, or what's do you have a priority, or do you don't have a resource? So it'd be good to have that conversation and then put a proposal.
Yeah, we also need to benchmark across other police forces in Australia about what the service is that we actually deliver here, because in some places, some of the services are not delivered by other state and territory police forces and are actually delivered by other agencies. And quite frankly, we have a situation where a lot of my members spend time doing functions and tasks that should be done by other agencies.
Such as?
Well, now you're getting really... Yeah. Look, we spend a lot of time dealing with social issues around mental health consumers. We spend a lot of time doing that, and we look at, mental health issues can sometimes be a safety issue, but they're a health issue. They're not a policing issue. They're not something that we should be that our police should be spending a lot of time on, unless people are actually in danger or not being safe. But mental health consumers generally are not violent. They just need medical assistance.
That's an interesting observation. Yep.
I have two questions. One is like, if we think something is a bit suspicious, and if we report, but it turns out to be nothing, so then is there anything happens to the people who report? Like,
do we get back to you? Yep. So if you want that feedback, yes, we can let you know what happens.
Mm-hmm. So another is, how is your response time usually, like if people report something?
It depends what it is, and we have a priority dispatch model. So obviously life-threatening emergencies where people are at serious risk of harm gets the highest priority. And within the ACT, I think it's 7 minutes or 9 minutes, and 90% of our calls have to be attended from within that period, and we always get that. The ones where we are sometimes delayed are the ones that are not time critical. They're not emergencies, but people are reporting things to us. So it's our priority 2s and priority 3s, which the benchmark is for a priority 2 is 2 to 3 hours, and priority 3 is 24 hours. It's some of those that we're missing those response times, but it's definitely not in sort of life and death sort of situations. It's not that.
Well, that's good to know. All right, let's go. One more. Yep, scuttling. Yeah.
Gungahlin Police Station. The area you cover, how far into the city does it go?
So we're bordered by Barton Highway and Federal Highway and ACT New South Wales border.
Excellent.
So it's pretty big patch, but it's manageable. Saying that, we're not the only police that you have available to you. So you have the resources of the rest of the ACT police, which includes traffic operations and detectives.
Oh, you can keep them out there, right?
Yeah. And but worst case scenario, we've also got the resources of the AFP if necessary.
No. Yep. Right, super quickie.
Do we still do the RBT? Haven't seen that for years and years.
Yep. We still do. There's a ratio of random back tests that we try and do, which is a certain ratio based on the number of licensed drivers that we have. It's still a case of anywhere, any time, on any street. And every vehicle that we have is equipped to do random breath testing. So random breath testing could be we pull over one car for no other reason but for the randomness of it, or we set up somewhere and we pull over 300 or 400 in one go. The benefit of that is drivers don't know when or where, so you make alternative plans.
Plan B, I believe, is the party line.
Well, New South Wales used that. I didn't want to...
All right. All right. Well, thank you, Rod. It's always a pleasure having you along, and you do a great job. I think we all appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm going to head off.
Go out and do some of that police stuff. All right. Thank you again. I think our next speaker is Trevor from Barton Planning, talking about the... Block 1, Section 5, Gungahlin. It's really boring, but it's the Magnum Mart home hardware site, so all will be revealed. Thanks, Trev. The clicker's click, yeah.
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Trevor Fitzpatrick from Barton Planning, planning company helping the property owners on this property. My apologies for the Magnum Mart. Old habits die hard. Of course, it's home hardware and has been for some time. Basically, what I'm here tonight for is just to provide a briefing on the proposed lease variation and the refurbishment of the site, and to get any feedback. And I'll come to the bit later on in the presentation about the terms of the lease and just a different approach to the way commercial properties address Crown leases, and that'll become clearer hopefully for you as I go through my presentation. For those who don't know where the Home Hardware Magnet Mart site is, it's that whopping big building on the edge of the town centre, straight across the road from Bunnings. You can see the general arrangements there. I'm assuming everybody knows generally where it is. I should say at this time, there's probably a reasonable level of knowledge that when it turned into Home Hardware, it was controlled by Woolworths Group. We don't act for Woolworths. Woolworths have no interest in the site at all any longer. The site is owned by a consortium of local residents who manage funds and invest in properties and the like, but they are Canberra residents, and so it's actually owned by a company called Hargis Properties, as I said, a group of local residents, and Woolworths have no interest at all in the site any longer. That's the existing building, the existing car park, and general arrangements of what's there at the moment. Again, if somebody wants to explain, I can, but I'm assuming everybody generally knows. If you're a resident of the local area, you know the area. From a planning perspective, the land is zoned commercial Z3, which means it's a services zone, so it's not a prime retail zone. And amongst a whole range of objectives of that zone, one of the objectives is to accommodate retail uses requiring larger sites, among other objectives it tries to achieve. The territory plan allows for shops and indoor recreation and a whole range of other uses in the area. For those who know the planning codes and the territory plan, you'll be aware that there's a Gungahlin Town Centre precinct code, and within that precinct it divides the town centre up into even further precincts. This particular precinct that it's in is one called Area 3A, and that is meaningless to most people. However, but it specifically identifies this neighbourhood as a service and trades area, and in that regard, the lease for this site, which is still the same lease that was there for the previous Magna Mart Home Hardware, allows for bulky goods retailing. So at this point, I guess what I can say here is that there are two things in the pipeline at the moment. For those who are on top of things, there is already a development application has been lodged, is currently on public notification for refurbishing the building. Following that is the area of my focus tonight, is a lease variation. So what's being proposed is, from the architectural and construction point of view, from the DA that's already in the system and on public notification, is to refurbish the one massive big building, to demolish a good area of the rear of the building. If you recall, and I probably will take it quickly back to that site there, you will see the building goes right to the boundary up there. Have a look again. Now there is a massive loading area that will cater for 3 lanes of semi-trailers. So a semi-trailer can pull up to a loading dock on every one of these tenancies, and another semi-trailer can come past and pass the other way. So, and that turning bay is a turning bay that caters for semi-trailers at the end. So it is a refurbishment of this facility that will take bulky goods, large format retail activity. Some areas call them homemaker centres. There's a number of terms for them, and I'll get into the target market for tenancies and the like in a moment. But that's, in a sense, what's happening with this site here. So the car parking and the frontage remains a lot of the same. The building, I'll show you some refurbishment, but the loading docks are a significant change to the rear of the building and a demolition of a good part of the building to achieve that. Here is just some imagery from what's being proposed. That from over here you can see it was blue on my screen, but obviously the projector. The blue of the Home Hardware, that's pretty much what's there now. This is the architectural upgrade that's happening across the frontage of the site to divide the building into tenancies and to give each tenancy a a frontage and an upgrade, if you like. In a sense, the main home hardware was just a great big shed. You can see here the shed behind is still effectively the shed behind. But from a streetscape perspective, it will dress it up quite a bit. There's some general imagery about what the improvements are trying to be, and looking at from different angles at Quinnigan Street and is that a circle, Quinnigan Street? Hopefully I've got the street right. And then from inside where the main entry is at the moment. So again, it's a fairly significant architectural improvement from the existing building. From a parking perspective, the car park that's there at the moment stays and is just upgraded. For some time, this part of the car park's been a bit of a mess and was used previously by the hardware shop for more storage and not much parking in that area. So this will all be brought back into the parking, which hasn't been parking for some time. But essentially, that surface car park will remain as is with a similar number of car parking spaces. This is just shaded out, not because it's to be taken out, but that's just shaded out for the purpose of that plan to show where the tradies and the workers will park. So that area will get fenced off during construction works. So that's the only reason it's shaded. Then it comes back to being a car park for the shop. As I mentioned before, there's two applications in the pipeline. One's already in for those building works I was just showing. The next one that's coming in is to rejig the terms of the lease. At the moment, the lease just says bulky goods, right? And bulky goods have a specific definition under the territory plan. And some of these things, believe it or not, in the territory plan get called bulky goods, and some things that we think are bulky goods don't get called bulky goods. So, for example, just without being specific, I can go into Bunnings Hardware and I can buy a small packet of screws, and that's a bulky goods purchase. I'm in a bulky goods store. I can go into a baby products and buy a cot, but that's a shop. And the current lease doesn't allow the word shop. It allows the word bulky goods. So some of these uses that our clients are targeting don't fit in the word under that term bulky goods, which is requiring us to do the lease variation, and that's generating here. The target market they're looking at, and I can't tell you, but you can make your own conclusions of the specifics of where they're targeting, but there's market negotiations happening now with proposed tenants. But their target market is outdoor camping style stores, homewares, Manchester. As I say, baby goods means, I think there's baby bunting and there's baby something or other, you know, there's crops and prams and that sort of thing. Pet products, there's a range of those major pet stores. I think one, Pet Barn comes to mind as one. Now, I'm not saying that they're the ones that are going there, but there's discussion with those type of places. Auto parts, we're also talking about with a prospective tenant about an indoor recreation or a gymnasium. And where it's got alcohol there, that's actually bottle shop type of the large scale bottle shop. So that's the sort of centre that they're looking at, those tenancies sort of creating in this space. I mentioned before about the current Crown lease allows bulky goods retailing, industrial trades and retail plant nursery pretty much, and the industrial trades is a building timber supplies and the like. So that's pretty much what was there before. As you can see there, provided the use is limited to building supplies and the like. The lease also has a minimum and a maximum floor area. We're not proposing to change that, so there's no growth in the building per se. There's adjustments, as I mentioned before, to the floor, but it won't go over or under any of those figures there. So essentially what we're trying to do here is to add the word shop and indoor recreation. So these are the two new words in the lease. However, it's a different approach, and that's part of why I'm here today and getting feedback, is that we don't want just another stock standard shopping centre. We don't want a dress shop or a shoe shop or those small scale shops that rely on a degree of intensity, degree of customer turnover where the parking demand is higher, that they're well catered for in the existing shopping centres. So we're proposing, which is different to most approaches, if you most people probably won't read commercial leases. I spend my day reading them. But most leases will say shop limited to 300 square metres maximum, or shop limited to some maximum. And you'll often hear in the newspaper about supermarkets. How big can the supermarket be? And the lease will control that. Our approach is to do the exact opposite. We don't want, in this facility here, to compete with the existing shopping centres. We want to offer a totally different product. And so we're saying each of these tenancies, where they're occupied by a shop, should be limited so that there's a minimum of 1,000 square metres, forcing any tenancy that comes along, any future occupation of these shops, to be one of those camping stores, baby stores or what have you, not a shoe shop and a dress shop and a what have you. And as I said, that's the primary approach. We don't propose to change the overall GFA. And in doing that, sorry, they should have had a note at the bottom and I thought I had put it there. There's certainly no proposal for a supermarket. It's just not in the contemplation of any supermarket in this complex at all. So that's, as I said, the purpose of tonight was to sort of show you where the redevelopment, refurbishment of the building works is up to. As I say, that's the DA that's in the system and the public notification now. Following behind that is the DA we're about to lodge, and it'll come on public notification, but it'll be the lease variation with that quite unusual approach to require future tenants to have, if you can't be 1,000 square metres, you're not there. You can't be there.
All right. Discussion and questions. Okay. First you, Damien.
Thank you. That was very interesting. Are you proposing just to fill a row of national branded franchise operators, or are you actually going to look at people with ideas locally that might be able to fill that space? What's the commercial reality of that sort of question?
The commercial reality prevails. Our client is a group of local business people themselves. If you had an idea and you wanted to contact us, we'd put you in touch very quickly with our clients, and they would be very interested in helping and seeing if they can accommodate new ideas like that. However, Gungahlin is of great interest to national companies. So yes, there is a significant interest already from a whole range of, and you guys probably know them without me actually saying the actual business, and as I say, I'm not in a position to confirm. I'm sounding like a politician, I can't confirm or deny. But yeah, there's clearly a strong national interest. And if tomorrow each one of those gets signed up, or says takes a tenancy and there's nothing left, well, so be it. The operators, our clients, clearly have 7 tenancies, and if 3 of them fill up and 4 of them are empty, come along with an idea. If 7 of them fill up, presumably they're going to leave some empty because waiting for some other idea to come along. If there's a long-term national chain store or what have you, in those sort of categories that they're looking for, if they're available, they'll go with it.
Cool. Yep, still. Yep, here.
So you have proposed a recreational one of the tenancy. Mm-hmm. So is that more like gym only, or restaurant or function centers? So what sort of
the recreation?
Yeah.
Actually, it's just a straight out gym. That's all. As I understand that there's some level of interest. I understand there's a number of other gyms in the town centre. I'm not sure of the market there, but I'll leave that to the people who operate gyms. If there's, but I put that there simply because there is market interest in one of those tenancies being a gym. So, but that's all it was, a gym. So.
Any other questions there? Okay, Kevin and then
Henley. The parking lot's been closed for a long time. Seems a pity. Why is it closed? Can't we use it now? What's the reason for closing it?
I can only speculate. I don't know why it's closed because of these tenants, but we have other clients in another town centre that closed the car park purely because of insurance problems. that they had no insurance for the public liability of a person parking a car that wasn't related to any commercial activity. So it was easy for them to close off and fence it off. That's what they did in Gungahlin on a site I know of. My speculation is they've possibly done the same here.
Maybe the guys could have a talk to the ACT government, because at the moment they're doing a planning on parking. It'd be good if perhaps the clients could have a talk to the ACT government about parking, because at the moment there's been a big parking review that's going on, and it seems a resource that should be used.
So what's the plan B if you don't find any tenants? Do we follow the same thing? We approach the government, change the zone, and build some apartments, or it's?
At the moment, there is no plan B. I think the landowners, the lessees, have enough confidence that, as I mentioned before, and I'll let you guys speculate. Think about national sort of people that deal in outdoor products. You know, there's anaconda, boating, camping, fishing, raise outdoor. Think about those sorts of places and go through each one of those. They're getting inquiries every single day. The market is very strong for these sorts of facilities in Gungahlin Town Centre. I think they have so much confidence that they don't need to fuss, is this all going to fall over? They're not. So as I said, there is no plan B. This is their proposal.
Excellent.
All right. Well, that's the number for the questions. Trev, thank you very much for coming in. It's actually very exciting to see the site moving on from being idle, so it's great. Right, thank you very much. Just park that here. All right, the team from Cyro. Oh, sound. We didn't get sound.
That's the HDMI. Should
You reckon
work.
it'll work?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you give me a slide? Yeah, no, I'll put it on the desktop. Right.
Hello everyone, my name is Guy Barnett from CSIRO. I'm a scientist in the organisation, and I'm joined by my colleague Matthew Morgan, who's the Gungahlin Project Director. So we've got a tag team act as well. I'll be starting with some of the history of our Gungahlin site, and some of the science that we've been undertaking and work that we've been undertaking to date. And then Matthew will talk about where we're up to now with the project and where we're heading in the future. So here we've just got a map of the site. It's a large site, it's 701 hectares, so the blue boundary is the boundary of our property. We have the Barton Highway that runs on the eastern side of the property, William Slim Drive and Gungahlin Creek to the south. The site's split in half by Coringa Drive, and then we have sort of Owen Dixon Drive, which is borders a number of suburbs in Belconnen, Avet and so on. CSIRO has had the site since 1958, so it's known as the Gungahlin Experiment Station. It's been used for agricultural research, primarily cropping research and plant breeding. There's actually some a gluten-free barley that has just recently been developed on that site, and a German beer company that we're engaging with, which is quite exciting. But what CSIRO does with all its properties right across the nation, we constantly look at them to make sure that they're being utilised to maximum effect. And this particular site, we only really use about 80 hectares of the 700 hectares. Primarily, so those 80 hectares are the cropping areas here and on the other side of the site. So Cropping areas are arable land that's good for plant breeding research. The rest of the site we graze sheep on, but that's largely the extent of it. So the site was deemed to be underutilised. CSIRO has since bought another property at Burrawa, not too far away, where it will relocate its agricultural research. So we're in a process now of transitioning the ongoing research from this site to our new site at Burrawa. There are a couple of colours on this map, which I'd just like to explain. So there's some red areas which have been identified through various environmental studies as areas where we have rare and threatened species that require protection either under Commonwealth legislation, the EPBC Act, or under local ACT legislation. So they're areas that need to be set aside and conserved. The orange areas are additional areas where CSIRO scientists have gone onto the site and looked at those areas and decided that there's additional buffering or additional areas that have conservation value that on top of that we'd like to protect. So in total, it's over 30% of the site that we're looking to have set aside for conservation purposes. And the remaining areas of the site, we're exploring options for a sustainable urban development. Our aspirations as a science organisation are for a world-leading sustainable urban development where science informs a lot of what goes on this site. And my colleague Matthew will talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So that's where we're up to. In terms of the conservation areas, I guess we have the usual suspects in terms of golden sun moth, striped legless lizard, significant areas of grassy boxgum woodland on the site, and there's a number of threatened bird species as well. We have been undertaking science on the site already, so we have some grassland restoration trials that are being undertaken in partnership with the ACT government and a number of community groups. So that's looking at the role of cool autumn burns, so using fire to actually manage some of our native grasslands. We're also engaging with the ACT government, but also the Ginninderry sort of group as well around the little eagle, which is a threatened species in the ACT. So we've actually, in that broader partnership, put a satellite tracking device on one of the little eagles, and we're starting to learn quite a bit about where that bird travels and how it moves through the northern parts of Canberra. And in fact, what we did learn, which was a first, is that species actually in winter heads up to the Northern Territory, so it heads up to Darwin and parts of northern Queensland. So that's just an example of some of the science that we're undertaking on the site at the moment. I have a brief video that I wanted to show. So one of the things that we've been doing for the past 2 years now is running some community planting days. So we've invited the community onto the site, and we've been planting shrubs into our grassy boxgum woodland. So there's a restoration effort that's going on there with the purpose of trying to bring back some of the threatened woodland birds in that part of the landscape. We've run we've been going over 2 years. The second event we just held in May over 2 consecutive days. We had the well-stationed Cub Scouts out in force both the previous year and this year. In total, we've probably planted close to 5,000 shrubs on the site, and in the last series just in May would have been at least 1,500 shrubs that we've planted in the ground. And that's a really good way for us to engage with the local community, to talk to them about our aspirations for the site, and also to hear their interests and concerns as well. But I might just play the video now, which it should just start automatically from the next slide, hopefully. The trick will be the sound. No, it's...
I will definitely avoid it.
Are declining. We're losing them. What these shrubs do is it's like a magic recipe. You basically add shrubs and it's somewhere where the birds can come and forage, find insects, they can build nests, they can take refuge from the currawongs, the noisy miners. It has an incredible impact, just a small patchy planting like this.
We've got a land care badge that we plant the trees to bring back the birds to this environment.
As part of Reconciliation Week, we asked Wally as a Noongar elder to come and welcome us to country, and Wally is also showing our community members the scar trees and giving some interpretation, some culture, some background. What is it? How did people use the land? What did they do here? Who were they?
We're still a living culture where everybody is still learning about culture, like our next generation are learning about the way we used to do things, and part of my role, I guess, is to be able to impart that knowledge onto the younger generation. As Aboriginal people, we have a strong connection with country that we need to try and convey to other people so that they can develop that understanding as well and look after country.
So that's it. I'm not sure how well you could hear that sort of up the back, but the video is up on the website as well, so you can access it there. I should say that the Well Stations Cub Scouts visited their trees they planted the year before, and many of them were actually taller than the kids themselves. So we've been really grateful for the support we've had from them, and also the Gungahlin Catchment Group in running those events. But I might hand over to Matthew now, who can talk about sort of where we are now and where we're heading.
And I might just say I actually enjoyed the soundtrack, or the new soundtrack for the video. As Guy mentioned, my name's Matthew Morgan. I'm the Program Director for Gungahlin, and I'd just like to thank you actually for the opportunity for us to come and be able to update you today. As many of you will be aware, CSIRO has been investigating the best utility for the Gungahlin site to benefit science, the environment, local community, as well as the wider ACT. As a first stage in that program, CSIRO released a request for proposal in July 2017, and we've received market feedback from that process. So throughout 2018, we've been considering that market feedback and recognising the need to ensure the very best possible outcomes from the project, as well as to reduce complexity for bidders. We're actually going to commence a new RFP process over the coming months throughout 2018. So I guess the thing that I want you to take out from this is that we will take the time to get this right. We have exactly the same aspirations as we always have, as Guy mentioned before, and that's to have a sustainable urban development that is backed by science and innovation. So as Guy mentioned earlier today, we have already actually applied our science in terms of identifying and mapping those extensive conservation areas within the site, over 31% of the site itself. Now that's obviously vital to protect important habitat, but also to protect public access to those areas. We're also developing a comprehensive science portfolio, which sits under our Future Cities platform. And we will be engaging with industry to discuss how that science can actually contribute to the development itself. We also intend to undertake longitudinal monitoring of the environmental conditions right throughout the life of the actual development. In relation to the new RFP process, we are working very closely with the National Capital Authority, other Commonwealth agencies and the ACT government. Some of the matters that we're in discussion with are obviously around planning and approval processes, looking at road and traffic management, catchment and waterways management, conservation issues, as well as looking at public and open space. And that's very much one of the reasons that we're here today, is that we want to engage with community associations like yourselves to be able to gather input to take into those conversations with our counterpart agencies. And we want to continue basically to have this kind of community engagement, particularly to gather input as well as consultation going forward into the new RFP process. And also to be able to continue to update you via our website as well. It's a short update from me today because of where we are in the process, but I just wanted to say that we see this very much as the start for continued engagement with input and consultation.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you, Guy. Any questions? They're up at the front, just a moment.
Thanks. A couple, if I may. Maybe I'll just give them to you one off at a time. Can you translate conservation zone in terms of likely future use? What will those orange and red zones look like in 10 or 15 years from now?
Yeah, so I guess, so we've identified those areas as areas that CSIRO believes needs to be protected. The red areas would be protected under legislation, so they would be set aside as conservation areas. There's obviously a planning process that we need to go through to sort of formally designate those areas. But certainly, our aspirations are those red and orange areas that we've set aside would be conservation areas in the future in the timeframes that you just mentioned.
Sorry, I just don't understand. Does that mean exclusion zones or simply non-developmental zones?
So we're saying that the approach we've taken is to work out where we believe areas that should not be subject to development, and that's what we've mapped out, those conservation areas. They need to be set aside for purposes of the development and to protect the conservation values in those areas.
But that can mean public access, presumably, walking paths.
Yeah, we haven't got to that level of detail yet. There will be some areas which are of higher conservation value than others, but certainly there'd be others where we'd be encouraging kind of walking trails and access to nature in those spaces.
Okay, thanks.
We just don't know which one will be determined that.
Right. Okay, that segues a little bit into the next one. I'm interested in CSIRO's, I'll call it interface, with the other land management agencies. Is CSIRO the owner and is going to retain the sort of capacity to control development and that sort of thing here, or is it will the non-conservation part of the sites be handed over for management by the more traditional governmental agencies in terms of road development facilities, etc.?
The answer is that not all of that has been determined as yet. So we are in conversation with all of those agencies to determine exactly which agency does actually undertake that maintenance. But obviously, in terms of the development itself, as per normal development, the on-site as well as various external works would obviously be funded by the development. And so we are working, because this is, at the moment, it's Crown land, national land, but obviously all the utilities and other elements need to plug in to the ACT. We are working both with the NCA, the National Capital Authority, as well as the ACT government together to determine how all of that will happen and how it's going.
So you've answered one of my questions. It's actually Crown land. So is CSIRO a lessee or a controlling agency or something like that?
Department of Finance, as the holder of Crown leases to the
Right. And then the last one, if I may, it's a little bit off. Was the land that Crace is now on originally CSIRO, part of this CSIRO land allocation? Okay. It used to be sheep. Right. Might that be a model for what happens with this much larger land plot in future?
I can honestly say that we are looking at several models. And we've done a certain amount of benchmarking, basically looked at projects like within Australia as well as overseas to look at the best benchmark of sustainable development. So we're looking at a couple of those. I can't go in. There are things I can discuss today, things I can't discuss, partly because of the RFP process itself. So I can't actually go into the specifics of it.
Okay, I said 3, but this is 3A. Is this stretching the CSIRO's normal remit in terms of controlling land development in the broadest of terms, small d development? Progression from one use to another. Is that must be sort of on the edge of CSIRO's experience and expertise zones, surely?
Well, you will be unsurprised that to be able to go through this process, we need to take an enormous amount of consultation with the government, and we have powers within our Act, and obviously we can't go outside of those powers. So everything that we're doing and the way that we are looking to go about this development takes all of those things into consideration.
Thank you.
Make a quick observation. It's not the first time CSIRO transitioned a site from something to something else.
Thanks, guys, for coming down. So when are we likely to see this project to kick off, and do we started thinking about the block sizes and those kind of things?
There have been. The quick answer is to say that it's not entirely possible to say exactly again because of obviously we're going to go into an RFP process itself, and part of that also comes down to a potential developer looking at the phasing of the development itself as well. But obviously we have had early considerations of what the precinct site can look like, but obviously there will also be an enormous amount of input from the potential bidders into that process. So it's impossible to say right at this point in time exactly.
Timeline was a question.
It's difficult to say, but as a guess, I can't see it breaking ground before 2022.
Okay, right. Later, just over here. I'm going to lobster.
Just with respect to, I guess, motivations behind it, does this actually generate net revenue for CSIRO or for consolidated revenue?
So, obviously, we're looking in many ways at a triple bottom line. The land as itself, because we have purchased Burrowa, and as Guy was saying before, is effectively not being completely utilised by us. Any revenues that are actually derived from the land sort of go back into CSIRO science.
Okay, so you guys get to make a bit of money and you can do something with it, like save the whales or something. Well, something a bit more local. But I was just thinking of something really crazy, like, it's open land, it's open space. We've got development craze on the brain, especially around Canberra. You couldn't just leave it, leave a bit of it, a bit more of it,
Well, as you can imagine, all of these things are a balance, and so we do have to look at what is the best, and we were saying what is the best utilisation of the space itself. We have, as you would have seen, put an enormous amount of time and effort
More questions? Comments? Okay, so at the moment you're looking to get an RFP out in the next month, 6 months? Over the coming months. Terrific. All right. Well, thank you very much, Matt. Thank you very much, Guy. All right. Well, that completes the formal agenda for the day, of the evening. If there are any other questions, queries? Yes, there is a question, query. Is this going to be an update on Gungahlin Drive?
No, just a quick one was from a fellow resident, couldn't be here. Just any rumours around the place about the cinema? There was a bit of a black hole last time we had a meeting.
It's the first of several.
The facts are that the owner of the site is in court with one of the potential providers of cinema services.
Okay.
So, one of those things that's in court for the ACT Supreme Court. So, no one meant to say much, but if you go and Google Gungahlin and cinema Supreme Court, you'll find a case that's there. That's why it's stopped. There's litigation underway between the owner of the site and the provider. That's why it's stuck. So, much as we'd love to blame the ACT government for it, it's not.
All good.
Is it next week? 17th? 15th, okay. That's the next sitting date. Damon?
Is there going to be some sort of grand opening of the light rail? And will the GCC be taking a leading role in that?
I'm not sure if I'm at liberty to disclose, but the Celebrate Gungahlin event festival may be making a rise from the ashes. So the ACT government are very keen to make a bit of a splash when the light rail is substantially complete. I'm not sure what the word substantially means, but certainly the Gungahlin is substantially complete. The Hibberson shared space is complete. The park work is complete, and of course the bus station is already complete. And they've proposed to put some effort into an event, and I think we're targeting the
20th of October.
Yeah, okay. 20th of October is what's been targeted. But obviously it's still coming, but that's the plan. And there will be an event, and there'll be stalls and stuff. And we have asked if we could please actually get inside one of the light rail vehicle now. We'll see. It's a stretch goal. Any other questions, queries? I know Mark is trying to find out from the ACT government exactly when they think they may be finished with Gungahlin Drive. Do you want to venture any feedback on that, Mark?
Yeah, so I've been talking with Roads ACT, had a good chat with them last week. The last advice that Minister Fitzharris gave in the chamber was actually around November. Stage 1 was meant to be finished at the end of July, and Mirabai Drive by the end of the third quarter. Obviously, we're coming up to that now. So it looks like October, November for Gundaroo Stage 1 to be finished. So just in time for Christmas.
Yeah, I mean, the more you question ACT Roads and responsible ministers, the more sheepish they get. And, the story essentially goes, everything that could go wrong did go wrong. We didn't realise the gas mains would be where it was. And, the way we remediated it wasn't as good. And, the weather hasn't been that great. It's just been...
So it was a 12-month project that has taken over 2 years now. I've been in dialogue with Chris Dill, who's now the new Minister for Roads, and asked him directly, because he's been quoted on our page saying there's been complex issues. So I've asked him what those complex issues were and why they weren't accounted for during the planning phase. The gas main certainly shouldn't have been a surprise that it was there. And all those works really should have been done before turning the first sod back in the day, and putting us under that road work starting then. Obviously it doesn't change anything, but I think as a community we just want to understand how this has happened to us, and I suppose what protections can be put into place to ensure that this won't happen again. I think we're seeing some positive progress certainly along Horse Park Drive. The works up to Mulligan's Flat is proceeding quite nicely. They're out doing the last layer of the road there, so realistically we should see that completed over the next coming weeks, and then they'll push further towards the Amaroo district playing fields. And then we've got the intensive work that's happening now towards the highway, and that's going to be obviously quite disruptive for still some time. We've received some feedback in relation to the sequencing of the traffic lights at the Well Station end to see if they can be allowed to be green for longer in the PM to allow that traffic through. Last night it was backing up towards the AFP complex. That's how dramatic it's been, and because it's also the road is compressed at Well Station Drive at the moment. So there'll be some things that certainly we and the GCC can go back to Roads ACT and ask them to consider.
Microphone.
On Gundaroo Drive at the moment, I mean, that business with the gas mains is pretty well done and dusted now. It should be finished off very soon. Now, I mean, I've had engineering consultants have a look at that, apart from basic incompetence in planning. I mean, that's water under the bridge now. But why on earth is stage 2 forging ahead when stage 1 is hardly anything's happening to finish it off? They're blocking off the intersection there. Surely a rapid effort could be put in there. Woden Construction is just getting away with blue murder here, and no one is holding their feet to the flame.
Yeah, I'm not a construction engineer, so I'm not sure. I can say I've certainly heard that view expressed, but it's...
Yeah. So, we can certainly ask questions of Roads ACT and the Minister. There has been excusable delays provided within the contract bounds by the contractor, and that does revolve around scope change, weather, things like that. But certainly, like I said, Chris Steele, as Minister now, has come out and said complex issues. Well, what complex issues are there within a 1 kilometre stretch? Like I said, it doesn't change anything, but...
One of the problems we've got is that all this work are a whole series of individual projects, but when none of us actually see the individual projects, they just see, I'm living in a construction site. Everywhere you turn, it's construction. Even though, Gundaroo Stage 1, which is the piece we're talking about, Gundaroo Drive Stage 1, and the Mirabai Drive duplication and the intersection are actually 3 separate projects. And, they're run on separate contracts, and who knows what's going on. Gundaroo Drive Stage 2, they actually learned from the fact that they made sure the gas main was there. It was, and they're remediating it before they start on the road. So they have learned from that experience. It's tragically sad, and it's all the result of no investment in sort of the early 2000s through the middle 2000s, so 3 or 4 years. There was no investment made, so it's all 3 or 4 years later now. So.
I'm,
it just is what it is.
I'm quite keen to see, and I haven't spoken to Peter about this yet, so I'm putting him on the spot. I'm quite keen to see a working group that sits underneath the GCC, specifically talk about roads, and invite Roads ACT to come along and basically start a conversation, and so that there's a bit more community representation around what we want to see. So I think that's the community's kind of saying, this is all happening to us, we're not having any say. There was a survey done a number of years ago around, do we want to do all these roadworks now, or do we want to stage them one after the next? And the survey result did come back saying, let's just get them all over and done with once. And I think that there was a case of the community saying, the money's there, let's just grab it. And then we are now seeing feedback through social media, people going, why are all these roadworks happening at once? Well, a survey was done. My Gungahlin, the GCC, did promote that survey. There was a good result to it. But it would be a case of that if we did it one after the other, then we would be having roadworks for eternity. So it is a bit of short-term pain, long-term gain. But I think now that we're over this hump, we need to look at it a bit more a staged approach, going, what do we want next, and what do we want it to look like? Where are those pain points and choke points now? And use that as an election bid in a way. Okay, well, who can commit to this over the next 2 election cycles, say? So that's certainly one idea.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. I'm concerned that there are no other duplications or significant roadworks actually in the pipeline being planned. If they're not planned, if the funding's not there to do the planning, then it takes a year to get the funding, do the planning, and then another year to get the funding to do the building. So if we wanted a duplication of, say, the rest of Gungahlin Drive or the rest of Clary Hermes Drive, then if we started right now, it'd be at least 2 years before that starts. So that's one of my concerns, is that clearly the planners have allowed for duplication of a lot of the roads inside Gungahlin, but there's nothing going underway. So I think the working group idea of concerned citizens is a good one. We should pursue that. All right, getting close to time, so we'll just last few, but yep.
Roads bloke. Mirrabee Drive, where it hits Gundaroo, they've closed 2 lanes down to 1. Now, there's ample space there to have the second lane to turn back to Horse Park rather than go up Gundaroo. I don't know the reason why they've closed those lanes off, because the traffic backs right back. They could open them up for 2 hours, then close them off. But in peak hour, it's...
Yeah, no. I mean, the whole situation, until it's done, remains, in a word, hopeless. But I think one of the things when I sort of mentally filled in my form in that survey a couple of years ago and said, yeah, I want it just to all be done. I didn't know I'd be signing up for it. All being done would take 2.5, 3 years.
True.
All right. Is it good?
Should we invite Chris Steele to the next meeting?
I think it's about time we got the roads community back. And on that, I will wrap for the night. I'll just remind everybody that we do have, we're coming up to AGM season, whether we can get organised enough to make that happen for the October time frame or not.
Are we going to all come back here every month, or
We are permanently moved here to Gungahlin, the Gungahlin Club. I cancelled all the bookings at the Gungahlin Library earlier this week. It cost us nothing to be here. It was costing us $150 a meeting at the library. So we're here. And it's great facilities. Pretty happy with it. All right. We'll be around for a few more minutes. I'm going to buy myself.